Hello, and welcome to the Eva Kennedy Show. Thank you so much for joining me. I truly appreciate it. I reached out to my guest a little over a month ago, and I asked her to be a guest on the Eva Kennedy Show. And at that particular time, I shared with her that I wanted to be able to talk about the loss of a loved one and how do you move forward after you lose a loved one. And what I didn't know at the time is that this subject would be weighing so heavily on so many hearts today because it was just this week that 9 people died in a helicopter. And 2 of those 9 people was Kobe Bryant and his daughter. And there's been a lot of conversation this week about grieving and hugging your loved ones and just spending time with your loved ones and the difference that you can make while you are here on earth. So welcome to my show today. Today, I am saddened, but also grateful that I can bring you this show so we can talk about the loss of a loved one and how do you move forward. So for the next hour, I am going to sit and have a conversation with my guests because my guest, Ms. Pearl Lawson. Thank you for joining me, Pearl. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Eva, for having me.
Yes. Pearl lost her husband about, 7 years ago?
Yes.
Yes. And she and I, and it's funny because we met each other through Barbara Bates. Shout out to Barbara Bates. Pearl and I are both breast cancer survivors, and we just clicked. Our spirits just kind of clicked. And again, once I realized I would be back in the studio taping the Eva Kennedy Show, something said to me at that particular time, why don't you have Pearl on the show and talk about how do you process it and how do you go forward after you lose a loved one? And again, it's just so happened that that helicopter crash just recently within the last few days, and of the 9 people, 2 of them were Kobe Bryant and his daughter. So there's been a lot of conversation since then about how to move forward and how do you process it. So again, Pearl, thank you so much for joining me today, the Eva Kennedy Show. I truly appreciate you being here. So tell us a little bit about you and how you're doing.
Well, I am doing well. I truly can say I'm blessed beyond measure, and moving forward.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's just jump right into it. It's been 7 years.
Yes.
So, and you you've been married for 24.
That's correct.
So tell us what happened. Was your husband diagnosed with the illness? Was it sudden? Tell us what happened if you don't mind sharing.
Oh, not at all. I would love to share. He actually was diagnosed with they call it esophageal cancer, which is a very aggressive form of cancer. Most people don't survive esophageal, and when they do, because it's not really, you don't really know until the end stage. Mm-hmm. The only thing that you would know is that heartburn and indigestion, only symptoms.
Okay.
But all of us get heartburns and indigestion occasionally, but there's really no symptoms early on to detect it. So unfortunately, most people, when they find out, it's like stage 4. He did live for a year and a half after being diagnosed. And again, healthy male, just living life to the fullest, and just went to the doctor one day to have his physical. And he kind of mentioned to the doctor that he had been having some discomfort when it came to swallowing certain foods, and occasionally, he felt, it would just be some discomfort.
Right.
Well, the doctor said, well, why don't we have a test? And they did an exam, and it came back showing cancer cells. And, because he said he had been feeling this kind of off and on over the years, but nothing to really complain about.
Nothing. It wasn't alarming enough for him to go to the doctor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was always going to the doctor for a physical every year, but
Right.
But at this point he felt like he really needed to say something. So it came back showing, cancer cells, and they wanted to do surgery. They did surgery to remove what they thought they had removed in terms of the growth there.
Uh-huh.
and only for it to later just spread very aggressively. So he lived for about a year and a half. He had chemo and radiation, but did a lot in that year and a half. You know, he married my niece. We went down to New Orleans. I mean,
Right.
just a lot of great things that he accomplished. He was already doing great things, but even more so. The
Yeah.
Lord would allow him an extended time. You know, every time we thought that, things were going to go one direction, but at the end they ended up going in a totally different direction. And, I'm at peace with everything now. I had to finally make peace with it, and, he lived a good life.
Good.
Wonderful husband, wonderful father, wonderful brother, brother-in-law, friend, pastor to many, so he's a great man of God.
Yeah, that's right. Your husband was. So you're the pastor's wife.
Well, associate pastor's
Associate
wife.
pastor's wife, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, and losing a loved one is something that we all will have to experience at some point in our
Yes.
lives, and each person process it differently.
Absolutely.
Some people get angry. One of the things that I was looking up before to prepare for this interview, this conversation, is the stages of grief. It's a process, and sometimes when people first learn about, like in your husband's case, he was diagnosed and he did have some time.
Yes.
And some people, like the helicopter accident recently with Kobe Bryant and his daughter and the 7 other people, that was instant. So their families didn't have time to process it.
Right.
And I don't know if it makes a difference, because at the end of the day, once they're gone, they're gone.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
I think for me, what I thank God that we had an opportunity to say, see you later.
Yeah.
Not goodbye, but see you later. Because we know that with Christians, we will see each other in eternity one day.
Right.
And so we had those quiet moments, he and I at the end, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it brought the whole story full circle. It was he and I when we met.
Right. Oh,
Before, you know what I mean?
The 2 of you.
The 2 of us, and then at the end, it was just 2 of us.
Yeah.
So, so I think for me, I'm grateful how the story ended. I mean, truly, I would have loved for it to end in a whole different way. But if it had to end in which it did, I'm glad it ended the way it did. That I got to hold his hand.
Right. So
know
you
what
were
I mean?
there when he passed
Oh,
away.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I stayed with him. The last 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks, he was in what they call hospice care.
Right.
And so that became my home with him. So, where he laid, I laid.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it was truly a God-ordained relationship, a kingdom relationship, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's hard to, as time moved on, I'm here today because God has given me the strength 7 years later.
Well, I'm glad, because, I remember my mom passed away in 2000, and I'm from the East Coast, and I live here in Chicago. When my mom passed away, I had gone home to be with her because she was having a 15-hour surgery because she had been diagnosed with cancer. And I was so glad that God allowed me to be there with her, because I can't even imagine getting the call and flying home. But what I do remember also, that it was about 6 months before I could talk about her without getting emotional. It was very, very difficult. And so how were you able to process it? Even the next day you wake up, how do you get up, you know?
I think I was numb for a while. I was moving through life, but kind of numb, you know what I mean? I think that because I was with him through the process, I was grieving already.
Right.
I not only that, I helped him. He was alive where we could plan his funeral. We could talk about some of the things. I would ask him, do you want this? Do you want, so, and just even going through all that, we have one son, and at that time our son was stationed in Kuwait.
Oh, he was, okay.
He was in military, doing military that time. So, and of course I always say I signed up for this. I don't think that should have been his responsibility either. But just to kind of give you a background, so he was away, so everything was on me, and which was good because I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He had people who wanted to come and stay with him at the hospice, and give me a break, and I didn't particularly want to do that, and he didn't want it either. We had one person who stayed, and when I got back the next day, because I only stayed one time away from home, the rest
Yeah.
was there, and I really needed to go home and take care of some things and come back the next morning. But he says, Pearlie, don't go again. I says,
Oh,
I said,
right. He wanted you to be there,
I
yes.
said, I won't. Trust me, I didn't really sleep. You know what I mean? And when I got back, the individual said he had been asking about you. I said, I know, because we both been thinking about each other.
Right.
So it was very difficult. We were just that close. We enjoyed being married. We enjoyed our friendship. We had a friendship, when you can sit up all time of the night
Your
and
partner in life, yeah.
and talk, and we get home and we just talk into the midnight. I
Right.
mean, and it was a wonderful love relationship, friendship. Our marriage impacted family members, cousins, particularly his side of the family, where there were a lot more younger people. And I'm so proud today because many of them are married,
Good.
doing so well, married some really nice men, and they grew up on the west side of Chicago. That's where my late husband was from. He grew up on the west side, but later went on, after graduation, went on to college a little bit, and then he ended up, when he left college, moving to the north side of Chicago.
Okay.
So he probably started living on the north side when he was about 20-something. And then ended up working in the suburbs in Glenview, and that's where he and I met. But to make a long story short, it impacted his entire family.
Yeah.
And most of them no longer live on the west side. Has a sister that lives there, but all the cousins and nieces and nephews, they have moved on to the suburbs, Westchester, Bolingbrook. Decided they wanted a different route and have done well for themselves. And my sister-in-law would say, well, that's why we always wanted to bring them. She said, I will always bring them on the North Shore,
Right.
so that they could see what life was like outside of the West Side.
Right.
And so for me, when I do that walk for the Barbara Bates Foundation, because he's from the West Side, part of that is to make a contribution to the women, to that community, because of where my late husband came from.
And what you just said is so interesting too, because it doesn't matter who you are. You don't have to be big and famous to make an impact. You can make an impact.
Absolutely.
And life is, when you think about it, you were married for 24 years, but when you think about 24 years and you think about it today, that was a short period of time.
It was.
Very short, yeah.
It was very short. And when my nephews, they spoke so well at his funeral.
Yeah.
All the men, and to have young men, and they're all doing well, from my son to my two nephews and to his brother who came from the Carolinas to be a part they are strong African-American men who are assets to societies and not liabilities. You know what I mean?
That's awesome. So your husband made an impact, and you can still see that impact today.
Yes.
In the family members.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even with my son, bless his heart, he would, and when we talk about young men not graduating, he ended up graduating 11th grade when he should have been doing his senior year of high school. He was down at Tuskegee University doing his freshman year of college.
Awesome.
On a full academic scholarship.
Yeah.
Went on to, and I always said, because there was a male in the home, present in the home, his father was so impactful in his life.
Yeah.
So he's done a lot in his short life, and he's, again, what I'm most proud about him is he's a nice young person.
Right.
You know what I mean? A loving person.
Good.
And I always say, I don't care about you acquiring certain things. That's wonderful. But what I'm concerned about, you being a good person.
Right.
And so he is an asset to society.
So did that help you? Because I want to talk about the grieving and the process
Yeah.
a little bit as it relates to what do you go through when you lose a loved one? Did that help you at all?
It did.
Over time?
It did.
Over time.
Over time.
Yeah.
Because when you lose someone, it's unexplainable. As you know, it's just a process you have to go through. You go through the stages. You go through, maybe if we had did this, you start
Questioning.
Right, yeah.
If I'd done things differently,
Right,
maybe.
right,
Yeah.
right. Because he even questioned certain things. Maybe if I hadn't had, I says, you know, one thing about it, when it's not your time, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I said, sometimes, I said, you did the right thing. And, you know, doing the route you took in terms of medicine. And I says, believe me, if it's not your time, you're not going to go anywhere. Don't second guess yourself. But it's easy to get caught in that.
Right.
But for me, it was a journey. There were many mornings where I had to cry.
Yeah.
I had to take some time to really regroup and really figure out who I was now. You know what I mean? Because when you have been married for that long to one individual,
Yeah.
and you know what I mean, and you realize how pleasant that journey was, you have to really figure out what is this all about and what does this mean for me?
Right.
And I question God a lot.
And that's
And-
what, that was the other,
Yeah.
and especially because you're the pastor's wife, the minister's wife, because it's during those times so many people rely on their faith
Yes.
to get them through.
Yes.
But some people get angry too,
Yes.
you know, like, why did you take them away from me so soon?
Right. Well, I had my moment where I did get a little upset, and I questioned God. I says, well, what was this all about? Why would you take him at the prime? What was it what was going on? You know what I mean? And some things we don't get answers for, but we get peace.
Were you ever angry?
I think I had moments where I felt angry. I felt angry that here he was, an upright man. Here he wasn't perfect, because I don't know any perfect people, but he was a good person.
Right.
He was a faithful person. And he was faithful to the call on his life. You know, he's a faithful husband, father, you know, uncle, brother. But I was just questioning why. But then God says, you know, it was time.
Like,
He had
because you're
fulfilled.
questioning why him and why now?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And but what I got out of was peace. And then what I got too was bits and pieces that he had fulfilled the purpose. And while he was at the height, it was good to take him.
Right.
You know what I mean? He had done what he was called to do and impact what he needed to impact.
Yeah. Did you rely on any groups or counseling or anything?
No,
to help?
I had already had deposit things in my soul. It's like when you are doing well in life, you need to be in the Word.
Right. Okay.
And God will, and then I had talks, you know, I talked mine out. You know, I would share it with people. I vacationed a lot, so I got to talk to strangers. I got to talk to people who I didn't know. You know what I mean? I met couples along the way, and through it all, I was able to talk it out.
Yeah.
You know, and pray and talk, cry, you know what I mean? And travel and really heal through all those
Yeah.
experiences.
What about fear? Because to your point, like you wake up and it's like, okay, now I don't have him here anymore. And then, so were you ever afraid, like, how am I going to put one foot in front of the other to even to start to live without him?
Well, I wasn't fearful as much as, I don't think I ever had a fear.
Okay.
Because in some ways, I'm very independent in a sense, and not so much, I was single before I met him, so I knew how to live alone. You know, it wasn't
Right.
like I went from my mom's house into a marriage. I actually lived on my own for probably about a year. Then I was in college, so I had been able to live on my own. So, and I always knew how to make money.
Okay.
You know, have some skills. You know what I mean? And God has empowered me, and He's always had me, and know how to meet people, and to navigate. So it was never how I was going to move forward
Okay.
without Him. It was more, I'm going to miss Him. I miss him already. You know what I mean? I began to miss him the moment he left.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we even after he started to, health was really declining. I knew life would never be the same again because God had already kind of shown me, even though I was praying and begging and pleading, he extended time.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes you know, and you need to, reality need to
Sink
start,
in.
yeah. So,
And then we're going to talk about how your life changed. So, like, even at the time when he was diagnosed, and even after he passed away, did you start thinking about your own mortality? You know how you started looking at your life? And,
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. You know, at the time I was 48 when he passed away, so that was relatively young to become a widow.
right.
And I was looking at things differently, and I thought about, you know, even, I just said, I'm going to live. Death has no place right now and won't until I'm 90. I've got to see my grandchildren grow up. I've got to
Yes.
see my great-grands. I will be that person who will be here to tell the story and will live out the time that he wasn't able to live out.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
and I'm going to see a lot of people leave here. You know what I mean?
So you put the armor of God on and said, "This is it. I'm going to be here.
I'm going to be here.
Right.
You know, breast cancer couldn't get me almost 26 years, almost going into 20.
Congratulations.
So it
Congratulations.
couldn't get me then. So
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So I am here for a long time.
I love
But
that.
but I realized that I had to make up my mind
Mm-hmm.
and decide, because I know a lot of people don't want to live after they lose a spouse or a loved one.
Yeah, or some people, like I was saying too, they get so angry and they hold on to that
Yeah.
anger for so long that their quality of life is not even the same
Right.
because they're so bitter.
Yeah, so what
Yeah.
because I was already, I knew God, and I knew that if we're going to take the word for what it is and believe and have that relationship with God, then we have to live it out. I did have moments where I talked to God, and I was just, well, I don't, you know what I mean? And you have to have those conversations,
Right.
otherwise you can get bitter. But you know what? I know that He gave me peace. That's a peace that surpasses all understanding.
Right.
He'll guard your heart and mind through Christ Jesus if you allow Him when you are going through a difficult time. You know, again, I talked it out through strangers, people I didn't know on vacation, some I kept in touch with, you know what I mean? And that was my therapy.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you should say that because the peace was there all along. You just had to get to the point where you could accept or realize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I knew that he was no longer sick, suffering,
Yeah.
you know, because it's quality over quantity at the end, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so he did have a quality of life, and I wouldn't want him to stay here just suffering so that I can say, oh, he's still here, or,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Because now you're just existing. You're not really carrying out the quality of life that you once had.
Yeah.
And that was just selfishness on my behalf if I were to just say, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I realized that we're all preparing to go that way one day.
Yeah.
He just got there a little faster. He fulfilled his purpose.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you should say that too, because we all know that death is inevitable.
Right.
We all know that we're not put here forever.
Yes.
But we still, when we lose a loved one, we still have a hard time. And what does the Bible say? We're supposed to celebrate
Yes.
when they leave
Yes.
and cry when they're born.
Yes. Yes.
But as human beings, we do just the opposite.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I remember, and you're talking about being selfish, because I jog along the lakefront. And I talk to my mom every day since 2000. Every single day I go, good morning, Miss Georgia, and she'll say, morning, Miss Eva. That's what in my mind, because that's what I would say.
Right.
And I remember one day, this was about a year or so ago, I was jogging along the lakefront, and whatever was going on with me at that time, I was like, God, I miss my mom so much. I wish she was here.
Yeah.
And true story, that little voice said, you are being so selfish. It was time for her to go. She held on as long as she could, and she gave. I mean, because just think about it. I was blessed enough to have her in my life until the year 2000. And when that little voice said, you are being selfish, it was her time to go. That was a turning point for me, and it hasn't been that long ago.
Yes.
You know?
And that's true. And that's, you know, one lady said to me, she says, well, you're blessed. She says, because some women have never been loved before.
Yes.
They've been married, but they haven't been loved and treated well. And some who have never been married before. God didn't even have to allow you to be married, to give you a husband, you know what I mean, bless you with a husband,
Right.
and then for 24 years, you know. And so I just realized that, yeah, I can't be selfish because I have had it all in terms of what every woman desire in a marriage, and to be loved and being loved, you know.
Yeah.
And so, and to have that type of quality of man. And so when I start counting my blessings, I count.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times when I'm doing things, if I'm going on the west side, I can hear, hot dog, my baby on the west side.
She's like, my baby's getting out and about. Right, she's going to the neighborhood.
Especially
So you know that,
because he know that coming from where I came from, Chicago, on the west side, and that's when we talk about, you know, being married, and he brought out the best. He
Yes.
helped me navigate through how to get, you know, from the west side, because
Right.
for me, living in the suburbs in the North Shore, it was terrifying. Nobody went to Chicago really, and if they did, it was downtown.
Well, so you were a suburban girl, and he was a city man, right? So you were comfortable living in the suburbs, and coming to the city was like, ooh, that was exploring for you.
Right, right. And you know, and then for the west side, that was a big workup.
Yeah.
Because it was just like, oh, okay.
So with him, you had a balanced life.
It was a balanced life. It was a wonderful life, and he showed me how to do so many wonderful things outside of the suburbs and how to really navigate, you know, in the city, and to really open up. You know what I mean? Because it's a whole different world when you like you were saying, you know. And when he came out to the suburbs to live, because after we had our son, we decided we would purchase a home in the suburbs. And so for him, it was a big, you know, culture shock or what have you, but he loved it. Yeah. At the end, you would have thought, I didn't grow up in the area, but he grew up in the suburbs because he just flourished.
He flourished.
Everybody knew him, you know what I mean? And it was just like, wow.
Yeah. So what was the most challenging for you after he passed away? What was the most challenging?
I think probably not having the companionship, because he and I did so much together.
Yeah.
You know how girlfriends go? Well, I didn't really need girlfriends because he was that.
He was your friend.
He was my friend.
Yeah.
We did everything together, you know what I mean? And so that was the biggest thing, you know what I mean? Not having him there. I really had to really, really ask God to give me peace and to show me how to utilize that time and to how to extend that space to other people and other situations, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So now that's interesting too, because let's just stay right there for a moment. That was your husband, that was your hanging buddy.
Yes.
So instead of having the girlfriends hanging out, you had your husband.
Right.
So was it difficult going forward for you to now become friends or have that girlfriend that you could do things with?
Well,
what was that adjustment like?
It was, you know, it wasn't too difficult. I mean, I am, but then again, I can do things alone too.
Yeah.
I'm one of those type of people. I don't necessarily need a group, a crowd to go and do things. If there's something I want to do, I will book my travel. I will go to the event and show up.
Right.
You know, if my girlfriends, many of them are still married, and I wouldn't dare intrude. You know, I might put it out there, but I understand. When I was married, I really, you know, we did breakfast, we did things occasionally, but we all were into our marriages, in our families. You know what I mean?
You're the single woman now.
Yes.
Right. So it's like, you know, you were hanging with couples, and now you're the single woman.
Right, exactly.
You may not even get the phone call now because, like, she's single.
But you know, it's funny because my one girlfriend, she and I are still. She's been married for just as long as I had been married, and I still have married friends, believe it or not.
Okay.
I don't, and they never went away.
Yeah, because sometimes with people,
But but because I probably known them for so long,
Yeah.
and their husbands are like brothers to me.
Okay.
You know what I mean? They call me sis.
So they're like
Sis.
relatives.
Yeah,
in a way,
right,
yeah.
right, exactly. So we don't have that type of intimidation or anything like